live. Yes, looks like we're live. Hello, everybody. It's another Thursday, and we're the Anchore open source tools team. Thanks so much for joining us. We do these meetings every Thursday, these live streams where we'll talk about any and all things Anchore open source. We talk about SBOM generation, open source project inspection and analysis. We do security scanning for vulnerabilities and other types of interesting things. We do open source license management. We have all sorts of tools that effectively are meant to say, you've got an open source project or a collection of them or some material like a container image or source code checkout, and you'd like to know more about the composition of that artifact. We've got a lot of tools that can help you really dig in and get a lot of information, actionable information about that material. So I'm Dan. We also have Keith and Chris and Will on today, and we're the team that manages the open source projects here. Thanks so much for joining. Typically what we'll do is look at our open issues and pull requests that have a needs discussion, but it sounds like today there was the community meeting in the morning, and a number of topics might have come up, and there's some other topics that the team wanted to talk about as well. So we have some pre-cached issues to discuss. So I'll hand it over to you guys. Where would you like to start today?
Well, I can just give a quick summary of the office hours. One of the main things that, we could talk about is Vex implementation in Grype. We've had let's just say a weirdness where if you submit an open Vex document, the way that you have to specify things is to use a product name that matches the image and then have subcomponents in the Vex document that match the packages that you're trying to suppress things for or otherwise report on. And it seems a little weird, and I'm not an open Vex expert, so it would be great to have the whole team's consensus as to what we should do and then move our implementation forward so that it does the right thing. And I can give a link to an issue if you give me a second. But that was the main thing. We also don't have to talk about that. I think we have a path forward, but I would just love everybody's sort of head nod that it's the right thing to do. Yep, I got it. Just put it in the chat.
Oh, there we go. Yep. All right, let me open that up. This is 3167.
Right, and so Dario created a Vex document and it didn't seem to work. And so he got to looking into why and got into the implementation and submitted a PR, which sort of fixed it, but I think there's some kind of specific behavior we'd probably want to do. So anyway, I put a comment, which I thought I linked to, but maybe I didn't, towards the bottom of this that kind of has my thinking as to what Vex should be doing. But the gist of it is Vex documents, they have a product and they have subcomponents. They have statements, and each statement has a product and subcomponents. And so the statements say something like, this product, this vulnerability ID is not vulnerable, right? That type of thing is what a statement has. And so, like I said, the way that we were handling the product in the statements is that we're matching it to the image ID. And I think that's a perfectly valid thing to do. But the problem is if you put, let's say, a package name, a Python package name in the product, we're not matching that today because that's not the image name. And so I think a lot of people are fairly confused by that. And it's a little bit difficult for me to understand, reading through the Vex spec, but seems like the product really is anything that's in an SBOM, like any sort of component in an SBOM, which could be an image, right? I think the thing is, one of the things that probably led to the implementation that we have today is that we have the image represented in our SBOMs and consequently in Grype separately as from the components from the packages. And so in the other SBOM formats, in CycloneDX and SPDX, images are represented as a a package or a component in the SBOM, and then relationships make other packages contained within that image or something along those lines, right? But because of our implementation in Syft and /Grype, the image itself is not a package in the same way, and so we have some sort of special handling for that detail. Whereas if we had modeled it in the way that the image does have its own package and has child components of the packages that are found within it, then it would kind of mirror, I think, what the intent of the OpenVex statements are supposed to be, where it's like I have one thing contained within another thing, and that specific set of that relationship of child to parent is part of my statement to like narrowly exclude vulnerabilities from the results. Anyway, that's kind of the long-winded way of summary of the discussion. Right, and then Dario, who joined the office hours, submitted that PR, and it has a change that fixed it for him, but I don't think it quite has the behavior that I described in that little bit of pseudocode there. So does that
Yeah,
make
so
sense? Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to try to summarize sort of the way I think about it, which I think is sort of similar, which is basically like, so we have an SBOM, which is a list of stuff, and then we have an OpenVex statement, which basically says like you should disregard your normal vulnerability scan and instead have this opinion about this product, right? And so it'll say something, like not affected, vulnerable code not reachable, or something like that. But the Vex document statements, like we need to guess in Grype, like, is this is the product, like the image, is the product a package within the image? And so we sort of need to figure out which parts of that SBOM the Vex document applies to. And it doesn't have sort of the same definition of artifact as Syft, which makes it a little bit harder to think about. And I think the initial implementation basically said, let you write down very narrowly, like for this image with this digest, this package is not affected because there are inline mitigations or whatever. And that made a lot of sense because then Grype can say, am I scanning this image? And if I'm not, I can just do nothing. And then if I am, like I can ignore packages with this name. And so it, like, on the one hand, it doesn't make a complete like OpenVex support. On the other hand, it like avoids the problem of having a Vex document running around that just means I don't care about Python or whatever, right? Like it scopes them really narrowly. So yeah, it's not obvious exactly what the right um the right way to build it is. But I think Keith's analysis was really, really good and really helpful, that we have this problem of like, do we have the kind of OpenVex document where a subcomponent is a Syft artifact, or the kind of OpenVex document where a product is a Syft artifact? And then within those branches, do they match? So yeah, Chris, you have your hand up.
I added a comment into our call chat. It might be related to this as well. Um, but can you guys give me a quick info if I'm barking up the same tree with this? So in our Zoom chat, there's a link to a comment about subcomponent versus product identification. Um, so this user posted on the main Vex issue about how they expected a knack for the ID uh, MacDoon test, which is the binary that he built, like that's the module, which then contains the sub-component Golang glog v1.2.3. However, the knack didn't happen because, in his opinion, what he thinks is happening is that we are knacking against the presence of glog itself, not against the ID that you can see, the formal ID of that product. So for whatever reason, when we query the list of components that are in the SBOM, we're only looking to knack against the subcomponents there and not the component, the ID at the top. And I don't know if the user who came to community hours, if their change would allow us to compare both subcomponents and that ID. But I guess that's what I wanted to ask. Is my confusion is, yeah, you're shaking your head, Will. Like, why does this seem similar, and where am I getting this like kind of confused as far as what's working and what's not?
Right. So I think that there's sort of two ways that things can be nested that we've seen in the wild in OpenVex. One is like this, where you say a package contains a package. And I think and so that could be like a there's a number of ways that maybe a package could contain a package, but the spec explicitly calls out dependencies. So that test package contains that vulnerability. So what this Vex document is supposed to say is like, hey, for these CVEs about glog,
Hmm.
like the vulnerable code is not in the execute path the way I used it in my test binary. And I think that that scoping is really important because this isn't like today in Grype, you can just put in the ignore rules in the config, I don't care about CVE 2024 45339, or I don't care about glog,
Right.
or even I don't care about CVE 2024, whatever, for glog. But you can't like write something this specific down. And so the hard thing here is that like this is a statement about the dependency graph, which Grype today doesn't really consider during matching, right? And we don't really have ignore rules that represent like dependency graphs. The other kind of thing we've seen, and this is what the initial implementation supported, is that sort of outer ID being an image.
Right.
Right. And so we say within this image, I don't care about glog because they're guarding glog correctly or whatever. Right. And like that was kind of working in main already. But like this kind of thing, it's really easy to get wrong in both directions, right? It's really easy to just miss this because we don't have an image, because Grype doesn't see the graph that connects glog to test binary.
Right.
And it would also be really easy to cause false negatives if we're scanning like a whole image and other binaries use glog and don't make this assertion. So I think that getting this right is actually a fairly complicated ask, because we sort of need a dependency graph aware matching engine over just to figure out what the Vex rules mean.
Right.
Um, and I think what we tried to do is basically have like a simple like parse the Vex statements into the existing Grype ignore rule structure, and that's struggling because it doesn't know about the dependency graph.
Well, and also it's working only for the narrow context of image that contains package. And so when I'm looking at that user's change that they like propositioned and not returning an error for that package context for a given like, hey, is your source SBOM from like an image source, right? Is the expectation of like what we're taking on to fix this is to do what you just said, Will, which is the both kind of both ways for Grype knowing about the dependency graph for a package and being able to knack stuff for its dependencies or its subcomponents, or are we only trying to do a fix within the scope of the way that OpenVex works for Grype right now, which is packages non-transitive that exist within images. Like kind of I'm trying to wrap my head around like what the scope is of the issue that we're trying to fix with it.
Yeah,
I'll let Keith answer that. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, yes, it's exactly the same thing, Chris. I mean, to answer that question, and it. So there's a two-part question. The part that you just asked, which is to scope this, my thinking is that initially we scope it so that particular case isn't handled. We would never match on anything there because that's a case of a relationship that we just don't. I mean, we could add that to Grype, but we don't have that today. So the initial thing that we should do is skip those particular records.
Okay.
And but it's the exact same thing as like when we take it, for example, when we export our Syft data model to SPDX, we create a container package, and
Right.
then we can create a contains for the other packages that we found within there. So like that's exactly the same thing that they're asking to do, except more generally for package to packages in those kind of cases. And that's kind of what I was saying. Like if we had modeled it in a way where containers were packaged with relationships, then we would sort of like have the same behavior for, for things that are down the tree in the same kind of thing. But we're just sort of implicitly doing it because we know that the way that we import SBOMs, we have a single source, which is the container. And so it has that implicit relationship, and things just sort of work easily for that case, or efficiently for that case without many changes. But yeah,
Okay.
sorry for being long.
No, that's okay. So maybe there's the two-pronged is doing that fix, not doing it in the way that the user suggested, but in the more holistic way that you just talked about. But two, the other one is maybe a larger documentation or update to the OSS doc site on if you're using OpenVex with Grype, here is the model that we currently operate within. Because we'll get, I mean, the spec itself seems very fungible and very easy to like go outside the parameters that we designed our initial implementation to work within. Does that sound right? Or am I a little off base? Like maybe we need to add a bit more specificity to how to use it so we don't get these other like edge cases coming in that we wouldn't expect in the first place the tool to work in that being provided that kind of document.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's basically just, some kind of, note about this package to package relationship case is not supported currently in Grype. So, that's
Right.
the gist of it. But image to package would be, and individual packages would be. And that's the thing that's, I think, missing today, because it's simple. It's like, I have a document, I just want to remove this vulnerability for this package, and that not working is kind of frustrating for people.
Yeah, that's super. And so when you say it's not working, I haven't played with this in a while. If you just put a package to knack in an OpenVex statement and give it to Grype, is it only looking at top level packages or does it also do transitive ones in the SBOM that we've like discovered?
It
Because it's a
ignores it
flat
all.
list.
It ignores it altogether because it
Oh,
doesn't match the image.
And
Yeah.
okay.
yeah. Well, one of the things I wanted to kind of dig into in this discussion is that that's an intentional aspect. Admittedly, so Vex was contributed to Grype by like someone who needed it for their day job and changed day jobs and never came back and did all the to-dos and stuff, and that's okay. But like that's kind of an intentional feature because it doesn't super make sense to write an ignore rule that just says I don't care about log4shell.
Yeah, you
Right.
don't knack a package, you knack a vulnerability with the ignore rule.
Right. And well, I mean, so that's what the top level like. So I think the use case we were trying to support is like I am, getting I am like paying somebody to build me a secure Nginx image, and it comes with a Vex document that like has all the CVEs against the image, like NACT saying like inline mitigations exist, or vulnerable code not present because we if-defed that out when we rebuilt everything in our secure container workshop or whatever. And like that model makes a lot of sense. And then once you have a Vex document that just means like I don't know, for Rails 5.1, I don't believe in CVE 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like, that's a surprising Vex document to me. And I was wondering if that's bugging anybody else about this. Like, is that we have ignore rules, and maybe we should just support that because you can already do it with ignore rules, and it's their product. If they say they don't care about this CVE, then that's fine. But yeah, and so that I think is the like hard problem that the original contributor was avoiding, is like, it would be, you can imagine like a security org where they have like, they have an old Rails app, and it has like I don't know, like a SQL injection in Active Record, but they put like some reverse proxy or pre-processing rules in it, so it's not reachable. You can't exploit it in their image. You can imagine like they make an OpenVex document that says, vulnerable code cannot be controlled by attacker, or inline mitigations exist, or whatever. There's a couple that maybe they could use, but it applies to like their build of that image. It doesn't apply to the package generally. And I guess if people want to use Vex to just say, I don't care about this CVE package tuple, like I don't care about this match, then that maybe we should support that. It would be really cool if we could get the matching like graph aware, like if we could have an ignore rule that's like if child of or if located at or something, and ignore it. But I don't think we could build that today. Chris, you have your hand up.
Well, yeah, I agree. We couldn't build that craftware thing today, but I guess I do want to call out that ignore rules came into Grype before OpenVex was a thing. Like Grype has been around longer than OpenVex has been a thing. So ignore rules were our first stab at like, hey, we have people that want to enact stuff. They want to do it from a first class. Like, I don't care about this vulnerability. That was very straightforward, and that was as a security engineer, that's something that you just wanted in your day to day. Maintain an ignore list, have that get filtered out, maybe update it every week or so, but keep precise the actionable things that come up in your report. I think we're kind of we're moving towards a place where maybe this year, maybe going into Gripe 1.0, we think about orienting our ignore rules around OpenVex. And what I mean by that is that Gripe should just work with OpenVex, but maybe we update our thinking and our model of like what an ignore rule looks like to just have that turn into like the most minimal Vex statement it could do. Um, and go from there, right? Because we have GripeDB. We could take the vulnerability that's in the ignore rule, look up the package it's associated with, like within the DB, and then craft like a minimal like knack this thing. And so maybe that gets us to like where we're all funneling into the same direction, so we don't just have these like two things that are both affecting how Grype views and filters results at the same time. Because OpenVex is here to stay. It's complex and defined enough to work for all the cases that we'd want ignore rules to work for. So maybe there's some architectural merging that happens this year between the two.
Yeah.
I
But
think
go ahead, Keith.
I think the one thing I would just note is that the ignore rules have features that aren't supported in OpenVex today. So I think it would be difficult to move to OpenVex, but I think it absolutely would be a great idea to add to the ignore rules anything we want to support from OpenVex. Just have them fill out ignore rules when we find them and call it a day, right? Merging those two things, 100% agree with. I think it's pretty close, but like obviously the dependency awareness, like that's something we don't have in the ignore rules today. We'd have to add maybe
Right.
some other things.
Yeah, because
Right.
ideally I'd like it to all go through the same part of the code that does the knacking and filtering and like undoing
Yeah.
of things that come out in the final report. And then the last comment I would have about it is that if it's not like if Vex doesn't support all the things that are in ignore rules, since we're pre 1.0, let's take like a real hard look at what we support that OpenVex doesn't and just say, do we want to keep supporting this? How much do users use this? Like what is something that's super useful that we have in here that people are relying on that OpenVex doesn't do that we want to keep around because it makes Gripe better than just slurping up every kind of OpenVex statement it could slurp up. Like that, I think that's a good question to ask as well.
Yeah, definitely is. I'm
Yeah.
I'm not sure if OpenVex supports file paths. That's one we absolutely need to support.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely review it for sure. That's a great point.
So it's interesting to me. It seems like, kind of to summarize so far, there are different forms of writing things down in OpenVex in terms of what it is you're trying to say. Communicate something about not assessed or NAC. And right now, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the case. Grype only supports one way of writing that relationship down. So, and there's examples over here on our documentation where, as you guys were saying before, that there's a top level product that has to be a container image, and then the subcomponent is a package. I'm pretty sure that's the only form of OpenVex we support right now. And so if you're trying to express something that is not a container image, or is just has product ID PORL, or product ID PORL subcomponent dependency, those are things we don't support. And I think that's what you're trying to communicate, and did communicate rather, in the issue, Keith, right? So that's probably just like super not clear, because it's complicated, right? So so I think we've confirmed that that's the case. So at least it kind of removes some of the ambiguity around the question from the user, right? Like,
Right.
Why didn't it work? That's why. The ticket doesn't have the OpenVex that Dario is using, but did you guys see it in the chat?
There's a link, the first link to a different issue that's a closed issue has, I think, the same one, and still doesn't work apparently.
See,
For the
So
that's what I
directories.
wanted to call out, because that's weird. If it's exactly the same form, like, so if Dario has an OpenVex that has a product ID that's an image and a subcomponent that's a PORL, that should work.
Yes.
So I just wanted to make sure we're differentiating between, like, the stuff we just talked about is true. There are ways of writing stuff down in OpenVex where it's not supported in Grype. But if the OpenVex is written in the way that Grype does support, that should work. So I just wanted to make sure we had two different follow-ups on this, it seems like.
right, I'm verifying right now, but
Because it says it's the same error, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the same input.
yeah, so the statement is, I'll just paste it in the chat here. But it's what we're talking about. It's not a something with subcomponents. It's just directly using a package as the product ID
Oh, okay. So we
with
don't.
no subcomponents.
Okay, so it is an OpenVex document that's written in a form that Grype currently doesn't support. The top level product is a package ID,
Right.
not a container ID. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So,
And it's my belief that this should work based on reading the OpenVex documentation.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's a valid
absolutely.
OpenVex document. So yeah, I think we could. And yeah, so that makes sense. I think one of the things that this is doing that I want to talk about for just a minute before we move on is, like, right now, right, basically processes a bunch of JSON at like DB build time, right? Funnel and Grype DB process a bunch of JSON at like DB build time and make all these statements about which packages are and are not affected. And then there are additional packages, like there's additional JSON provided at runtime that provides additional context. And something I would really love to see happen is eventually we hope to sort of merge the Grype and Grype DB projects a little bit, or at least get that code closer together. It's sort of awkward that it's two separate projects. There's lots of times in my work where I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a Grype DB branch just so it can pull in the latest Grype so I can run some other job or something like that. That's signal that maybe they should be one thing. But if they were, then we could imagine, like, reusing some code paths between like vex statements that are available at database build time and vex statements that are available at runtime. We could sort of layer the vex documents that are provided at runtime onto the existing vulnerability database and let the matchers run normally. And that might be kind of a cool thing to explore, especially if we're going to build stuff that's aware of like dependency graphs or qualified based on like only what is aware of dependency graphs or qualified based on like exactly what image we're scanning or something. It would be nice to only have one copy of that code. And we do see vendors saying like, hey, here's a pile of CSAF vex in the cloud, especially CSAF vex. And it would be cool to say like, okay, at DB build time, we'll ingest the whole pile of CSAF vex we know about. But if you bring more at runtime, we'll update the database accordingly. Probably in like an in-memory overlay, not actually like writing back to the database on disk, because we don't want to deal with figuring out all that locking and stuff. But I just think that might be a cool path that opens up. I don't want to spend forever on it because it's too vague, but it sounds cool.
Yep. Well, okay. Well, if we bubble all the way back up to your original question, Keith, I mean, from what we just discussed, your proposal seems to me to be solid, right? It seems like it's missing one bullet though that we covered, which is if a product is not an image and does have subcomponents, that's the one where we would need to consider transitive dependencies in the matching logic. And so that bullet in the list that I've highlighted here would say not supported, as long as like for now, right, until we get more of the transitive stuff stitched together internally.
Yep.
But that
I'm
would
adding
cover
it.
the space in the if else down there in the pseudocode.
Yep. I'm adding that to the comment now. So cool.
Yeah.
I think we had some other things we can.
Nice.
Well,
Oh, that
we
was
want-
a great topic. Like I think it'd be super valuable to get some. Yeah, I think. Yeah, Vex is definitely one of those folks are starting to use it a lot more, and we're starting to see some of the use cases happen where it's being used for what it was intended for, which is awesome. All right, where do you want to go next?
There's any of the ones that I offered up to start. I don't know if anyone else also has like pet issues or issues from this week that they wanted to discuss or bring up that they thought were interesting.
I say we go for it. So I've got them in order that you posted them prior. You want to start with this one?
Yeah, let's look at this one. This is
It's 4388.
So we just had a user comment on this 16 hours ago who said they were interested in working on this issue and that they've been kind of taking a look at it, but they wanted clarification on compliance actions for this. So let's talk about first what the issue is talking about. Some of these are like when you parse a requirements.txt, some of those are unversioned, and Syft completely ignores those and then creates the SBOM. I don't know. We already have the keep, drop, and stub for missing version under compliance, which allows those packages found in requirements.txt to still exist within the SBOM when it doesn't have a version. But I guess we want to have an error result when there are packages found without it. So let's see how we would respond to Zillow's implementation. So currently my fail compliance action, along with the other ones, doesn't actually do anything for certain package ecosystems because those parsers don't emit packages without versions. I think that's the right way to go, but let me also see something in strict mode. An unversioned dependency is not ignored but leads to an error. The current behavior feels like a silent failure, which is something a security tool probably shouldn't do. Do we think Syft should emit like should we have a full strict mode that this user could implement that would just fail the SBOM generation when it runs into those packages?
I I think I think I want to like think about that for a second, because what they're asking Syft to do is fail if there's a requirements txt in the artifact. And right, unless everything is pinned to equal or whatever.
Right.
And that is like, so Syft has generally historically had the like, if you point us at any file system, we will do our best to find everything we can, has been sort of what Syft does. And I think that an interesting question is like if you want to fail the SBOM because you have an unpinned Python dependency reported in the SBOM, like why why do you have a requirements.txt without some lock file or something, right? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah,
Can
definitely.
someone remind me if we scan requirements.txt in images, or do we only scan it on directories?
I think it's
Would
only
make sense.
directory. I'll take a look at the glob matching if we pull it in on images as well.
Pretty sure it's images. Yeah.
Oh, we scan requirements.txt in images?
We do it in
Uh,
images? I'm looking.
I believe so. Yeah. Chris.
Okay.
Sounds like.
Quick.
I,
I'm gonna do
I
some
wanted,
quick code splunking while you guys.
I wanted to note one thing about this though. It like there we have the unknowns feature too. Right. So like one of the things that we're not doing today is dumping everything into unknowns where we, let's say, fail to parse a line. But it would be very easy to add those things in, maybe via configuration or something like that. And that's not exactly what this user is asking for, but it would be fairly easy to tell if there are errors parsing particular types of files at that point and what the errors were.
So before we talk about what Keith just said, because it is important, my code splunking is finished. And for new package task factory, when we do python.new package cataloger, which is all of the glob matching, its requirements, poetry, etc., it's only tagged for the declared tag, the directory tag, and the language tag. So I don't think it doesn't look like the image tag is on this one.
Good, thanks for checking.
So that's interesting, that because I kind of want to go back to the use case and just understand it a little better. So we're scanning a Python directory with a requirements.txt, and we want to fail the build if something isn't pinned exactly, or we want to fail Syft if something isn't pinned exactly. And I just like, I guess that makes sense, right? Because you could write a requirements.txt where everything is equal, and actually, if you do like hit freeze hype requirements.txt or whatever, right? That's what you get, right? It can like be a lock file or a declaration. Am I making that up?
Yep.
I think
Nope.
that's right.
You're
Okay.
right.
So it sounds like they're sort of requiring that it be in like lock file mode. And I suppose that makes sense. So just I just think that like I don't know, in a way, like a scan is kind of inherently incomplete. It's always possible there's something that we don't know is a package or don't know the version of.
Right. I mean, well, this gets to like there's a little bit of a the scope and principle of the tool itself to consider, right? Where Syft is meant to, you point it at something and it tries to write down as much information as can be gleaned from that something in the form of an SBOM. So like if we didn't have a compliance section in Syft, I would say a legitimate kind of perspective would be to say, if your requirements.txt doesn't say equal, basically that's just missing information. We're still going to write it down in the SBOM because we know, you know, your material says it's supposed to bring in this software. This is not vulnerability scanning. This is just SBOM generation. Like this is as much information as we can get. But since we do have that cool compliance implementation, I feel like the suggestion is right. Like, you know, Keith, you'd mentioned we have keep drop stub. That's basically what, you know, if you encounter a partial information problem situation for some piece of software, how do you want the SBOM generation thing to respond? You can keep it, you can drop it, you can stub it out with some other information. Adding fails on seems perfectly in line with that subsystem. Right, so I mean, I feel like that's covered so far, but this sentence that I highlighted is what I feel like is where we're kind of stopped here. Like, does that make sense, Will? Are we still kind of wondering about the fundamental use case, or are you thinking the compliance thing subsystem we have isn't the right mechanism for this?
It sounds almost like yeah, no, I like the like fail, but like it sounds like maybe this config needs to be wired up to more catalogers, and that it sounds like this config would make sense to apply to both Python and JavaScript. And today it doesn't apply to JavaScript and has a different and JavaScript has a different default than Python did, or something.
Well,
right.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to understand here is that, you know, Zillow is trying to work on this, but some package ecosystems such as Python skip packages without versions. Does that mean our cataloger, when it's looking at requirement.txt, if there isn't a version, it's just implicitly skipping it? I don't understand.
But that's the default. Like, yeah. I mean, depending on the skip drop, like, what are the three choices today?
Stub, keep, drop.
Right, and so right, there's keep. I can't remember the difference between stub and keep, but it sounds like by default, I think the default position of this switch is drop. So if you scan a requirements.txt and it just says requests and it doesn't say anything about which version, it just it omits, it just skips that line. I think, and so I think maybe there's a contention that that's the wrong default, and we should at least default to like stub or keep or something.
I put a link in the chat to the code.
Thanks. And then for the rest of this person's question, it sounds like what we need to do is wire up this config to more packages, like, or to more catalogers.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm
right. Okay, and so the unknown errors will, like, that will become the unknowns in the SBOM. And so there will be an entry in the SBOM that says requirement, like requests was in a requirements txt, and we couldn't figure out what version. And I think having that, maybe they don't know to check that field in the JSON, because that's not really the same as a silent failure, right? Because the unknown or the known unknowns does that, right, Keith? That'll be in the Syft JSON.
It will, yes.
Yeah, but
at the file level.
But so it does seem to me though, like now I think I understand the confusion, because I think I have the confusion in my head as well as to how the compliance subsystem that we have interacts or reconciles with this conditional. Because it would seem like, I think it's legitimate to ask like, well, we have a thing called missing version in a compliance configuration to actually dictate what the behavior should be, but this code implies there's a built-in behavior.
Yeah, like we're like this code in the Python cataloger is not respecting the compliance config.
It is. It passes it in on 138,
Oh, rp.config guess unpinned requirements.
right?
Well,
Is that a different config?
I think, yeah, maybe guess unpinned requirements gets populated and injected with the config from the user. I have to look and see if
I
how
think
that.
that's a different thing. I think that's like if you have a range requirement, it's like guess the a version from the range. Whereas like you can also not do that and only use like exact versions. But that's different than the compliance. I think the real thing here is like this should be surfacing these components now,
Yeah,
and it just never got updated.
I agree.
And
Yep.
like that's the crux of the problem.
Because if you had a keep setting for your missing versions in your compliance configuration, if this said keep, I don't think you would see that
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
package because of this conditional no matter what, because it's not going to have a version. Like
I just
So
looked at the cataloger config too. It has no notion of this compliance config getting injected into it. And so maybe the compliance mechanism happens in like a post-processing thing that we haven't splunked into yet,
yeah,
but it's unclear, right? Like the packages are at least getting past the cataloger stage, and we have to look at the post-processing and see how that's handled.
Right. Yeah. So I guess that's the thing is the compliance is handled at the end, like outside of the catalogers. Catalogers always return packages and just exclude the versions, and then the compliance gets applied. So I mean, I think this is a pretty simple change. That cataloger should be consistent with the other things.
yeah, especially if that's like the only cataloger that still has that if version is empty, drop it behavior.
Yeah, we should the modern architecture and like modern assumption of catalogers is always emitting packages. Post-processing is what does the filtering and kind of changing based on users config. So good catch. Thank you, Zilaz, for the question. You found definitely an inconsistency in how we're handling it at the cataloger level. Um, I will write up a comment that responds to him if he doesn't watch this that just says, hey, we should probably always be emitting that package and have it happen in the compliance section. I need to do some splunking again to find that post-processing. So I'll do that after the call and link all of the code, all of the relevant code of what happens after the fact so that we can get him the right answer.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that was a good one. Good call out. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's see what do we got? I just want to do a quick time check. We got time
Time for like
for another one. Do you guys want to move on? Let's just go next on the list. We got add support for user provided content hints file.
Yeah, this is like Syft at its nascent. I don't even think I worked here when
Oops.
this issue was filed. Um, let's go 31 his file.
Oh,
So this came up in my like script of things to like look at because Keith, you added a comment at the end of 2025, right before the break. And I know that's asking like, hey, what were your thoughts before the Christmas break? Because those all go poof, and then January happens, and we get a bunch of new work that gets dropped on us. But what was interesting about this when I read it before we came onto the call was this idea of like template SBOMs that are grafted onto the resulting one and how that works for hints. Um, did you talk with Alex or anyone with regards to the SBOM edit capabilities that were coming up and how these hints would work? Or because I know we're at least talking about SBOM edit and managing that in the first two, like the front end of this year. So how did this hints capability like play with that?
I think this one was a little different from, I mean, definitely is related, and maybe there's something that, that should be done there. The main thing about this hints file is that we have a source name, a source version, a source supplier. We're talking about adding a few more things that are there's some PRs to add a few more types of data. And what all these are doing, they're the user wants to add this data that Syft doesn't generate because they want it in the final SBOM. And so the more I got to think about it, the more I'm like, why don't we just say, give us the SBOM data that Syft doesn't generate, and we'll graft it on there. And this way we can stop like adding flags for each individual thing and let somebody just add whatever they need in their output. That was the purpose of this idea, anyway.
So that's how it's related to the SBOM edit. Like to be able to add information onto, that's not present in the source material to specific artifacts, as opposed to combination, where it's like, I've got a container image, I know it has a bunch of stuff in it, it's encrypted, so nobody will ever be able to see it, but I still know it's there, so I want to write it down. We have support for that already, because there's a cataloger where you can drop an SBOM, say, in a container image or in a file system, and if you run that cataloger, it will read the like SPDX SBOM that you have and incorporate it into the SBOM that you get back from Syft. So
Right, but
part of that is covered, but the other part of it isn't. And I could see there being just a general approach to say it's all edit, right? So
I think what's hard about that SBOM cataloger is it works functionally for things that are components, like the flat list of everything that's in the SBOM, but not the top level, like either source or metadata factoids that want to go along with it. So it is kind of interesting to me from like a bring your own SBOM of like, hey, here's the template. I've filled out the 30 lines of metadata information that I want this thing about. And I want Syft to not do any of that. I just want Syft to do what it's good at, send the catalogers and everything against this image or this directory structure, and color in this larger template that I have provided. Because I, the user, know this system. I have metadata on my side that just tells me the description of the whole top level of the thing I'm scanning. I just want all the goodness from the cataloger capabilities that Syft has to fill in the blanks of what I couldn't like find transitively or what might have snuck in as far as packages that are totally deconnected from the metadata of what this whole top level system is that I'm scanning. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Is that like we can get parts out from SBOMs today. We can, read all kinds of different formats these days, but we don't really have any way of applying it to things that Syft is creating. We don't have any ways of like adding a complex supplier structure into SPDX3 because for some reason that's what the user needs, and in the end. And so yeah, like it, and it is that, of course, directly related to like SBOM edit in, at least in so much as, combining things together in some different ways.
Right, but it's
Um,
not like a post-process edit. It's a pre, here's the thing. And I want to what you said earlier, Keith, which was why are we adding all these bespoke flags or even the original intent of this issue, which was let's give a hints file. Well, yeah, we could add another file, type of file that Sith can interpret, or we could add another flag that colors in, or we could just start from the basis, like give us an SBOM, like give us a really minimal Syft SPDX or Cyclone DX box and we'll color it in all of the way. So maybe that's the direction that this feature is kind of asking for. Like Syft color in this file, not generate something new, just take this thing, read it, and then run all of your steps against it. We don't
right.
have that pathway yet.
Right, exactly. I guess that's kind of what I meant with the grafting, right? Is like what like start here and fill in all the other stuff, like where it's supposed to go in this starting point, and keep all the stuff that's in there, presumably.
Yeah, everything that's in there is verboten to overwrite. Like if you were going to put something in that field, don't do it. We trust the user, that they could get one, they would like create a file from nothing, but they could bring like a skeleton file that we then we know how to color in.
I think it's compatible with the existing embedded SBOM file cataloger, because that's just considered another source of information that then you could graft it into with your template.
Yeah, it's just another source of components.
Yeah,
and it
I'm just
works
looking
for,
to make sure they don't like compete with one another in terms of
yeah,
what's
so
the right way,
right. And the embedded SBOM cataloger is like sort of limited, but also protected from this interaction you're worried about, because it implements the package cataloger interface. So it can return like
Packages, relationships, and an error.
yeah. And so because it returns packages, relationships, and errors, if it has like beautiful metadata about where it came from, we don't return that. So it can't compete with what's being passed in from here.
How do people feel about that as a code path that Syft could do? Like, because the assumption right now is Syft just generates the document. There is nothing, there's no bytes, it creates the bytes and does it. But instead, a user gives it like a target to slap all of the things into and onto that it knows how to do. And it's not responsible for writing or creating the file. It's just updating and coloring something in.
We definitely have requests for combining SBOMs already. So if, even in the sense of here's an SBOM, add more stuff to it that you find, maybe combine, I think these are all like related in a lot of ways. And, again, SBOM edit too, like you said in the beginning. I think it definitely could be tricky to understand some of the more complicated things to do. The hints file might be remove stuff. And so like there's not really a direct way to say that in a typical SBOM.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how is like knacking or removing stuff. I guess that's the larger part of like the edit capabilities. Like people want to filter things out. They're like, I don't care. I know I don't care about this. Take it, go away. But that feels like its own like, just like at the top of the call we talked about OpenVex. That feels like a film or like a filter that you put on top of the final thing, not a not a skeleton to build off of like what this would be.
Yeah, some sort of Syft ignore rules.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting, the Anchore product has a constructor on this. There's an add, which was called hints, which is probably why it goes back this far, right? Back to when Anchore engine
Right.
was around. There's a correct, which is essentially a way to try to encode an edit capability through configuration. There was originally we were going to follow that up with the remove. Remove is a weird one. Like it's difficult to come up with a scenario where you actually want to remove something, where a correction doesn't accommodate what the actual problem is. But I feel like all of it could be encoded as edit. Right?
Yeah, edit
it's an
is
interesting
both
thought,
add,
right?
remove. Yeah, it's everything.
Yeah. Well, I hate to cut it short. We are at time. I just wanted to sort of, on this one, kind of wrap up. Like, it was a great discussion. I probably, seems like needs discussion is not a bad state to be in, because I'm not sure it's in a, we know what to do next on this one.
Yeah, because it doesn't fit totally into edit, but it is like a consideration of do we want these like kind of templates or skeleton SBOMs to be injected at the start of Syft that become part of edit down the line.
Yeah. So I think we're going to continue the discussion on this one, definitely internally, if not cover it again in a future live stream. But for now, I think we're at the top of the hour. Do you guys want to wrap it up for today, or is there any last thoughts? Sounds like we're good.
Well,
Excellent. Well, thank you everybody again. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you guys online.
take care.
Take care all.
Bye.